Cool. So yeah, just do a quick round of intros. I'm Ray. I'm the head of marketing at Freshpaint. I live in San Francisco. Let's say my heart is in Tahoe in the mountains, and spend a lot of time going back and forth between the two. And when I'm not doing marketing, I'm either riding bikes or skiing or like geeking out on third wave coffee that my wife criticized me for measuring temperature of water and grams on a scale in the morning. I'm going to hand it over to my friend James on the solutions engineering team.
Hey everyone, I'm James. I'm based out of the US. I lead the solutions engineering team here at Freshpaint. My interests are pretty similar to Ray's, chasing the snow, going up in the mountains. Don't mind a good cup of coffee either. Gil, I'll pass it over to you.
Oh man, hard to follow that. So hey everyone, this is Gil from currently very, very snowy Salt Lake City, Utah here. Glad to join everyone. Very similar interests to these guys over here. Definitely enjoy being up in the mountains and skiing and mountain biking, and definitely don't mind a good cup of coffee. So welcome everyone.
Yeah, you can see like that we don't like diversity at Freshpaint when it comes to interest, because we basically bring everybody in that likes the same thing. Dave, would you mind giving a quick intro for yourself as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be here in the background, happy to answer any questions, but I'm Dave on the marketing team at Freshpaint. I'm in the Seattle area and haven't skied in a long time, but looking forward to getting back to it this winter. And right now is one of the few times that I don't have a cup of coffee on my desk where I'd hold it up, but usually I do as well.
So this is not a webinar. Like webinar means like you guys are all like screened and no one can talk to each other and you have to just chat. Like if you feel more comfortable with any questions or feedback, obviously throw it in the chat. Dave is going to be looking for, opportunities to engage with everybody, but also please jump in and let's talk to each other. This is meant to be like super collaborative and conversational. We have a couple sections. I'm going to give you a little bit of intro to like, why should you even care? Like why we're here and what problems do we help solve? And then James and Gil are going to walk through an actual live demo of how Freshpaint works. So after each section, we'll pause for a couple minutes. And I think that'll be a great opportunity for us to have a conversation and get your feedback and any questions that you have. So if that sounds good to everybody, I'm going to jump in and get started. So just a quick plug about Freshpaint. We're a startup that's backed by Y Combinator and Intel Capital and a bunch of others that are been in the data space for a long time. We've got over 175 active customers on the platform. And we just recently closed our Series A and growing really fast, mostly hiring on the engineering side to continue kind of building out the story that we're going to share with you today. Just as a little bit like, who's worked with us, companies in pretty much every vertical, from marketplace solutions like Thumbtack and Monster to consumer brands like Adams and Breville. And then in the healthcare space, that's been a booming industry, especially with the rise of telemedicine during COVID. We have a bunch of companies like Talkiatry and Modern Health that we work with as well. I think the best way to kind of consolidate what do all these companies have in common, and perhaps many of us on this call, is that when we think about what we're all being tasked with, especially like as I think about our team in 2023, is we're trying to do like the impossible in some cases, like grow at this incredibly rapid pace with like fewer and fewer resources. And to compensate for that, we just have to be a hell of a lot better than like our predecessors have been, or even the bigger companies that we might be competing with. And the way that we can be a lot better is just to really understand our customers. And what I mean by that is like, as product leaders on this call, like I'm a marketing leader, but I've worked very, very closely with product teams at early stage startups. As product leaders, like you have to really, really, really understand what the problem is that people are facing and how they're navigating your product. As a product leader, you may need to like work directly or with marketing to figure out how to engage them better. right? You may have a hand in acquisition. How do you bring more people into the funnel so that you can learn even faster? And you know, how are you going to improve that acquisition efficiency? That is going to be table stakes for the next, you know, 18 months. And then, you know, you're going to also need to be able to share that data fluidly. So like the point is that customer data, first party customer data, the data that, you know, is all about your customer and their story, it is absolutely critical for us to be able to continue to like deliver the best possible experiences and grow our companies. I don't think that that's controversial, but there's a problem like with customer data. And the problem with customer data is that the way it works, and I think many of you probably are familiar with this, and we stop at the Q&A, like we can talk more about it. But up until now, whether you're using like a generic customer data tool, or whether you're just using like the event tracking in the analytics platform that you're putting in place, or the engagement platform, the way that it works up until now is in order to configure the actual clicks and page views and button clicks on your product or your site, you have to have an engineer go into the code base, and they have to manually set that part up. And so after, you know, a few years and talking to hundreds of product leaders, this is actually what that process looks like for most companies. And some people tell me this slide is wrong because they say there's no way I can get this done in a month. This may take me 3 months to get it done. But the point is that as a product leader, as a marketing leader, Dave and I go through this all the time. If we need new events so that we can build a new funnel in our product analytics tool, or so that we can launch a new engagement campaign in our engagement platform, we have to send a ticket to the engineering team, right? We have to wait for the next sprint, which you hope is going to be in the next couple of weeks. We have to wait for engineering to pick up that ticket. You know, we're probably going to do some back and forth because there's going to be clarification. They're going to actually then finally get that into the code base. And if it's a new event, we're going to wait a matter of weeks, just depending on the traffic you have within your product, your platform, to even get enough data to do anything with. And so this journey, like, you know, what I said to start with is like, we need to be agile. We need to have better customer data more quickly to do our jobs. This is the opposite of agile. Like imagine that you're burning a month every quarter to learn something new or test some new campaign. Like I can't afford to do that. When I meet with the board, they want to know like what I've tested this month. And if my answer is I haven't been able to test anything because I can't measure anything, like maybe I'll get like a get out of jail free card for 1 quarter, but I'm not going to get that for very long. And so this is a problem. We need to be able to capture these events in real time and to be able to move very quickly. To put it in like a customer story. So, you know, Stacy is the VP of product at Ruth Health, which is one of these telemedicine startups that we work with. And just think of Ruth Health as like B2C, but for healthcare. The product that they're delivering is you know, health services to women specifically. And what was interesting about my conversations with Stacy was that she really humanized this. Like, yes, she needed to move more quickly. She needed to be able to get the events that she needed to analyze her product and make decisions, right? Because that customer data is informing her roadmap. It's informing how she's prioritizing things. And what Stacy said to me that hadn't registered with me before is that not only is that process slow, but her counterparts and colleagues on the engineering team, like they don't even want that ticket. You know, these are Stacy's own words that, you know, whenever she knows that she needs to like go to engineering and ask them to configure more events, right? Like a perfect world is you launch a product and you have a perfect roadmap of every event that you want to get tracked. Well, when I talk to Stacy, she's like, that's impossible. Like I'm launching new things, I'm iterating on product. Like some things I just didn't even think that were important in the beginning to track. Like even with a great tracking plan, you'll never know, like you'll never have the full footprint of things because it's constantly changing. And what Stacy told me that I didn't register is that it makes her feel terrible to send those new events to the engineering team because she knows they don't want to get that ticket. And she knows it's going to pull them away from customer facing features, which as a small startup, that's a pretty big tension that she has. So this problem is pretty widespread. Talking to again, hundreds of product leaders, everyone has struggled with how do I get a more agile event tracking process in place, specifically so that I can make decisions more quickly and better prioritize my decisions and not wait weeks or even months in order to be able to do that. Because if you don't have the data, what's left is gut. And probably everyone on this call is super talented and super smart, and gut will get you a long way, but gut will also send you down false roads and you'll lose some of your runway and lose some of that precious time you have to get things right. So what's the solution to that? The solution to that is a world where you create a more agile customer data process. And what that involves is if you could unlock this process so that it doesn't have to exist in the code base, what if you as a product leader and me as a marketing leader, what if we could actually go in and say, I need to build this new funnel. I need four events to create that funnel. What if I could just go in right now, configure those steps myself in some kind of customer data tool, and then with a click of a button, send it to my visualization tool of choice. Maybe you like to use MixPanel or Amplitude. And I could actually get the results 30 minutes after I imagined them. That's the world that Freshpaint is creating. We're creating an ability for product leaders and marketing leaders to remove the dependency on the engineering process to enter these events in the code base and do this in a self-serve way. And we do that using a technology that we call AutoTrack, which helps automatically instrument your site and capture all the clicks and actions that are occurring. And this is one of those things you kind of have to see it to understand how it really works. And that's the part that my colleagues James and Gil are going to show you in a minute. Now, I do want to be clear that we don't have the worldview that AutoTrack solves everything, right? We believe that for our customers, we've surveyed them, 70 to 80% of the actions on their product and site, we can automate using AutoTrack. But still there are nuances, there's server-side events. As your data stack becomes more mature, you may want to set up some specific events that AutoTrack is not capturing. So we take a hybrid approach. The goal is let's push the continuum to 70 to 80% of the data set you need without engineering involvement. And then for those server-side events or those other things, you can bring engineering in, but you have way less dependencies there. And so we take that hybrid approach of you can use Freshpaint to auto-track most of your data set, and then we still have the ability to allow you to precision track. Precision tracking is, again, just engineers going into the code base to set up those specific events. So I'm gonna stop there. And I'll stop sharing so we can have a conversation. And I want to open it up to everyone for questions you might have. Now, remember, we're going to show you exactly how this works, and James and Gil are going to walk you through a demo. But this is a good opportunity to talk through kind of the problem and our solution to it. I guess I'll start with a question. Does anyone disagree with the problem? Does anyone is there anyone here that has not had the experience of tracking customer events and that process of actually getting them into an engineering sprint cycle? Did we hit a run on what the problem is with event tracking, or are we off? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't be shy. Michael, yeah, just jump in, man. You don't even have to raise your hand.
No, I think that's very legit for any business, whether that's some sort of coaching consulting business where you have a funnel, or whether that's a more technological project. Definitely, you need to track data. My question is, and I joined a little bit late, so if I missed that part, please excuse me. But what is the, do you guys track data in web apps as well as mobile apps? And also, what are the differentiators from, say, Google Analytics?
Yeah.
Sure. I can take that.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Michael. We were actually going to get to that a little bit later on, but I'm happy to speak to it now. So Freshpaint is going to do auto track. And again, auto track is every single click, tap, scroll, form field interaction, page view. We're going to do that automatically on any website, whether it's a single page app or not. We can also do that on any mobile app that is based in React Native and more recently also in Flutter as well. We are looking at building out support for iOS, but currently, if you are going to run Freshpaint on iOS or on Android mobile apps, you'll be writing code in the short term in order to pull that information in. The way that it's different from Google Analytics, well, first of all, I think, it's not a crazy point of view to say Google Analytics is not the easiest tool to set up to begin with, right? We make that a lot easier. We're going to walk you through in a second how we add a very visual and interactive process for letting you record the actions that you care about. Basically, we get you much further than Google Analytics does without having to write any code. And we'll give you some examples of what that looks like in a second here. Does that answer your question?
I think the other thing to point out is that Google Analytics is a web analytics tool. And it's an important one. So like you may want to make that like part of your tech stack. But as we think about, like in my experience, what happens is that's the very first, if you like, it's not a coincidence that like every single website in the world has like Google Analytics running on it. But as we start to mature, like we end up implementing like a product analytics tool so we can actually like build more customized reports and funnels. So maybe we graduate to like MixPanel to measure like the customer journey through the product specifically. And then we might want to do some A/B testing. So we have some A/B testing tools. And then we find like, hey, our activation thesis is panning out. And we've done a lot of work in the product to like get people to activate. But now we have a thesis that, well, maybe if we actually like motivate them a bit more and like message them at the right time, we can trigger activations that way. So now I'm going to invest in an engagement platform like an Iterate or Customer IO. So you can see the story here, like the tech stack keeps growing. Google Analytics just solves for Google Analytics. Freshpaint collects the whole data set and then allows you to send it to all those tools I just mentioned. So the value here starts to compound as you mature and you have more use cases and more needs that you want to address. So like the next thing you might add is a data team and you're going to have a data warehouse. How are you going to get the data set to the data warehouse? You have a founder who wants you to drop everything because they want to use a specific BI tool. Well, everyone else is using something else and they want to use a BI tool. How are you going to get that data to the BI tool? Are you going to like pull engineering off of customer facing features for the next 2 weeks while they code all that? Or would you like to flip a button and just pass that customer data set over to that tool? That's where the value of Freshpaint like really, really, really starts to compound for our customers.
And a follow-up question, do you guys integrate with no-code tools or for now just the actual with code tools like Bubble and other stuff?
Yeah, what are some, I'm not familiar with Bubble, but what are some other examples of no-code tools that you're thinking about?
Glide, Adalo, Bubble. Bubble is basically no code for web, and Glide and Adalo is no code for iOS.
Yeah, we can come back to you with an answer to that question. So the way we prioritize integration points is purely based on demand from our existing customers and incoming customers. And generally, the top requests are, you mentioned Google Analytics, that's clearly one, Facebook ads, Google ads, data warehouses, those are one, product analytics tools, BI tools, engagement and messaging platforms. But we are always open to like adding more integration. So yeah, I'd love to like learn more offline with you.
Thank you, Ray. Of course, yeah, we can connect. But ultimately, what your guys' value prop seems to be is basically allowing people like PMs to use the data faster without pulling in the engineering team. And so oftentimes PMs have to test new features and new sort of like hypothesis of a new product or a service or a feature. And so these tools like Bubble, Glide, Agile help you as a PM build it out yourself without involving the engineering team. So it's kind of like no code for developing new stuff. And so being able to also test, for example, engagement metrics and other things that you guys help test on those prototyped tools or those like MVP tools might be of value.
Yeah, those sounds like to me, James, that those would be like, that would be the source of the customer data, right? That you would want to feed into like a product analytics tool. So I'm pretty sure there are ways that we can make that work.
Yeah, and Michael, in general, there's no limitation to the types of tools that we can integrate with. Ray mentioned the way that we essentially have a kind of a Reddit style upvoting process where the most popular tools get built out. Most popular requested integrations get built out regularly by us. We also give our users toolkits for building integrations themselves. And so those are intended to basically just streamline and simplify the process of allowing anyone to create any integration that they want as a one-time thing that then just allows them to do whatever they want with any tool. So we got some more options there as well. The goal though is to never have customers be limited by not having an integration available to them.
Any other questions before we jump into an actual demo?
I have one, if I may.
Please, of course.
Okay. Firstly, a question from Ray to another Ray. So, so my question is that you did mention about MixPanel and Amplitude, right? So I did work with MixPanel, so where you're collecting the data from all these sources, and then you can also see all these metrics. You can track them through the funnel. So my question is that how does Freshpaint as a product is different from, let's say, MixPanel or Amplitude?
Yeah. So the main difference there, Ray, is that MixPanel requires you to write code in order to track events for MixPanel. Freshpaint, which we will show you in a second here, can allow you to send data to MixPanel without writing any code, just using our visual tagging tools. And in our demo, we are literally going to do just this, where we're going to we're going to pretend that we're a product manager at Freshpaint. We're going to look at what the process looks like to check usage of a feature and send that over to MixPanel, where we can see how many users have been playing with that feature over time. So I think that should speak directly to what you're interested in there.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Okay.
Yeah, is your first name Vinny?
Yeah.
So back to Vinny's question, I think it's a good opportunity to just go back to this slide. So all of these endpoints, right? Product analytics tools, engagement platforms, any of the tools that you want to use, they're kind of worthless without getting the customer data to them. And so that's exactly what this is that problem slide, is that if you're using event tracking with MixPanel, there's no way to automate any of that. You have to do every single thing by hand. Right. And now you're entering, unless you're the rare company that doesn't have a sprint cycle and your engineers will drop everything to do whatever you ask them to, which I'm sure you don't have that scenario. I hope you don't have that process. It's going to take a long time to iterate every time you have to iterate. So the worldview of Freshpaint is that we're all about helping you collect the best possible customer data set. And then with simple integrations, single click integrations, route that data to the tools that you prefer to use. So like MixPanel is your visualization tool. Customer IO might be your engagement platform. You might use app queues for onboarding. And basically, like, we allow you to use the best in breed tech stack, but we just help automate that customer data set to it.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Any other questions before we jump to the demo? So a little bit of a preview. I'll let James and Gil talk a little bit about what we're going to cover in the demo.
Cool. Thanks, Trey. So yeah, as everyone has mentioned so far, there's a lot of good commentary around speed to market, right? You've got a new project or a product that you're trying to get launched, and you launch it and you have no idea what it's doing, and you might be a little late to the party in figuring out how it can be improved. This is where I think Freshpaint really it really plays well into space. So we're going to go through installing Freshpaint, creating events and sending those events to your destinations, and then looking at how we can actually visualize that data in your product analytics tool of choice. So Ray, I'm going to steal a screen share and we can get started. So Mihai asked a question earlier, and you're correct. Freshpaint can be installed on your site as a JavaScript snippet, and what it does, when we talk about auto track earlier, it's going to automatically pick up page views, clicks and taps on your application, form fills, all of that stuff that your customers are doing when they're engaging with your site. It's pretty straightforward. So after you've gotten logged into the Freshpaint platform, you're going to go here under sources. There's a link for setting up Freshpaint on your site. You see here, there's an option for auto track. You can go and configure it, and it is just a snippet that you would install on your site. Just as a one-time add. Usually you have like a global template for your application where you can pop this snippet in and it just goes all throughout your site. So it's a one-time thing that you don't have to do it page by page, for example.
And so one of the questions we often get is, what is the best place to just make sure that Freshpaint is working? What's essentially step one, first thing I should do after I get the script on the page? So Gil, what would you point users to for that?
Yeah, correct. So now after you've installed the auto track snippet on your site, we have an option called Live View. And this is basically a running ticker of everything that Freshpaint is tracking right off the bat. So as you can see here, you can show only the all the stuff that you're doing personally. So if you're testing out Freshpaint on your own, you can very, very easily see your own behaviors, which is really, really nice. And that's a pretty standard workflow that people use. So Live View is a great option to first step for making sure that one, Freshpaint is installed on your app, and two, that it's actually tracking. So you can see here, I'm just going to randomly click around, and you see that under my user, I'm basically tracking all my clicks. So.
All right, so let's role play here for a second. We're looking at the Live View page. Let's pretend that we're a product manager here at Freshpaint, and we just introduced the ability to clear this view. So there's this button in the upper right called Clear. Let's set up tracking, of course, using Freshpaint on Freshpaint to figure out how many times all of our users are taking advantage of this functionality. This could then inform for us whether or not we need to maybe make this capability more visible in the UI, or if people aren't using it, maybe we consider removing it even. So Gil, how would we go about doing that?
Yeah, exactly. So, well, since we already have Freshpaint running on this application, let's just go ahead and click it and let's see what happens. So one, there's your new feature. It's going to clear out Live View. As you can see here, Auto Track has picked up this click on this clear CTA button. So that is basically something that we can now create and label a specific event on, which we can do that here. So let's go ahead and click on this create event button here. And we'll go ahead and create one. So it brings us to our event library where we can then create this new event, for example. And you can see here, you can name your event, for example. So we were going to go ahead and name it, something like Live View clicked clear button. What's cool about doing this from Live View is you could see some of the stuff is already pre-populated. So it's got a selector or the element that people clicked on. And you see here that the target text equals clear. So this is very, very specific to to that that behavior that the user has done to engage on your application to track that. So pretty straightforward. And then from there, all we need to do is create an event, and you're basically done here. So when you think about, you know, what Ray was talking about earlier, just need to track something very, very simple to know that people are engaging with you know, something that I just released, versus having to wait a month to see if that's really happening. You've basically done that now. So you can search for it here, click clear button. So now you could see that this event is set up. So that's one way to do it. James mentioned earlier that there's another way to do it in a more visual manner. So you can do that here under the left nav, under events. You'll see here that there's a visual tagger option as well. So I'm going to click on that. And all you have to do to get visual tagger started is, what is the thing you're trying to track and where is it being tracked from? Let's actually just run it on Freshpaint's homepage. So I'm going to go ahead and launch it. And as you can see here, it loads the page, and then we're in this mode called label mode. It is basically saying, hey, what do you want to label as an event? So let's, you know, for our example, let's do another click. So this is a pretty big call to action of getting a demo. I'm going to go ahead and click it. And you'll see here on this modal, again, there's the element that gets clicked. So it's already pre-targeted for you. You can then filter down your event to say, hey, I only want this to happen on the homepage, or you want it to happen globally. You can limit it to text of get a demo or whatever that button text is. And you can just click that, click it on a homepage, and then you can name your event again. So test event, get a demo here, then save your event. So that's it. So 2 ways of actually creating events very, very quickly without having to involve engineering. So.
Cool. So far, we've just shown you these different ways that you could set up events. The goal here is to have multiple paths for event setup that meet any user where they're at in terms of how familiar they are with the site. We like to think that everyone can use the visual tagger, and that allows anyone with any level of technical knowledge to be able to get started right away. But anyways, let's jump to kind of the present state here. We've set up an event as a product manager, trying to understand how people use that clear button within Freshpaint's live view. So Gil, how would we go about getting this information to MixPanel where we can actually do some analysis of it?
Now that your event has already been set up, you can go in and click on it, and you go back to your event setup. And under here, you'll see that there are a lot of different destinations where you can send it to. Let's actually go through setting it up in MixPanel. So I want to send this, you know, specific event data to MixPanel, and let's go ahead and do that. Under destinations, you're going to go here and click on apps. This is already set up because this is for our account. You'll see that MixPanel is an option here to get things sent downstream. Let's configure it. And it's pretty straightforward. You'll see that there's a lot of options here, but at a high level, to get data into MixPanel, click on this configure button, and you'll see here that it's going to ask for a token and API secret. So basically just a couple of keys that you can find pretty easily in your MixPanel account. Let's actually go into it and see where that is. So within your MixPanel account, for example, you're going to go to project settings, which we're here now, and scroll down a little bit. See here, we've got your access keys. So copy and paste the project token, an API secret, enter it in here, click save, and you're done. That's it. You've basically completed the integration, and now you're able to send this event that you've just created into MixPanel.
Great. So we've set this up. And Gil, did we send this event over itself yet?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so one step after you've configured it, let's go back to the library of events. Let's look at our click clear button again for the event. You can see here, let's go ahead and toggle this to MixPanel. And now this event is set up to actually get sent.
Okay, so we set it up. It's tracking from this point forward. what we're really interested in is the history of this action. And what we know is cool about auto track is that it's been tracking usage ever since the Freshpaint tag was added to the page. So how would we go about making sure that we're not just tracking this click moving forward, but we can actually see the entire history of the action within MixPanel?
Yeah, exactly. So this is a pretty common scenario where, let's say you as a product manager, you just launched a new product, got it out there, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I forgot that we actually need tracking for that. So now you've actually done the work to get that engagement set up, which is great. Let's actually go in, and since we were set up with MixPanel, we can now backfill, like James was saying, backfill all of this historical event data. So you can do, again, a complete backfill to go in, and as long as we've been tracking that specific behavior, we can go in and then pull in all of that historical data for any behavior that matches into MixPanel. You can do a complete backfill, or let's say you want to just track, I don't know, the last hour or so, you can also limit the backfill period. So that's those two options. Normally people will just, do a complete backfill just to make sure that they've gotten everything. But at the end of the day, you have some options there for getting your historical data into your product analytics tools for visualization. So what does that look like in practice? After we've done the backfill, let's actually go in and see it in MixPanel. So I'm going to click out of that, and I'm going to jump into the MixPanel platform. And let's just create a very, very, very basic insights report. So let's just jump in and let's select our event. So it's clicked, clear button. Fantastic. And we just look at it for the last 30 days, done. Like, we started tracking this today, but if our product was actually tracking it for the last 30 days, last 7 days, for example, we have all of this historical data. So not only are you able to get tracking very, very quickly, but you can also get that historical look back to see, are people really engaging with this product that I released in the way that I expect them to? Yeah.
Nice. So I just want to hit on a really key concept here. Without using Freshpaint, when you're setting up events for tracking and you're writing code to do that, you have to think of every question you're going to need to ask of your data up front. And you need to do that in order to have that be there when you need it. With Freshpaint, you don't have to worry about preempting the questions that you're going to need to ask. You can instead rest assured that everything is being tracked. And then when it suddenly becomes top of mind for you is when you ask Freshpaint for that information and then send it to the tool where it becomes valuable. All right, so I hope that makes sense. I also just want to kind of zoom out a little bit with the example that Gil just walked us through here. We just set up a single event, sent it over to MixPanel, and analyzed its usage over time. This is the same process that you can imagine recreating for, let's say, each core step in your user journey, right? You go through, you tag the events, and then you send them over to Freshpaint, and we will be able to tell you basically how people have navigated your site based on those events, as well as, of course, the amount of drop off between those core funnel steps. And it really is just a matter of repeating the process that we've done for you here with this one event. Cool. So I think we have some questions that we're going to turn around and look at. And then after that, we'll jump into a few more use cases that are typical of our customers.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, James.
I must have done that just out of reflex. So one of the first questions that we wanted to address is, what other types of destinations do we see our users using besides product analytics, right? So we've seen, in this use case, we've used MixPanel as an example. It's definitely one of our most common destinations, but we also see our customers quickly expanding beyond just product analytics use cases. Other things that we tend to see as a fast follow-up to product analytics is getting that same product data into places like email marketing tools, where product usage can inform campaign targeting, can inform follow up based on certain actions that have occurred. Simple example is always when a customer leaves something in the cart, how can you inform a response to them that has both what they added to the cart and the status of it still being there. So Freshpaint can send that information over to an email marketing platform like a Customer IO or something like that. We also see our users sending information to ads platforms. So Google Ads, Facebook Conversion API, ultimately to inform attribution for ads with actual conversion events. Freshpaint can help set that up. And then, of course, sometimes you just want to get Freshpaint data into your warehouse so that you can do whatever you already do with what is in your warehouse. So Freshpaint can send product data directly into BigQuery, Snowflake, Postgres, whatever you have. And that allows you to then, obviously have completely open-ended use cases, but we often see that it leads to integrations with business intelligence tools, further analysis with Tableau, Looker, other tools like that. Let's see, any other questions we want to address here? Otherwise, we can jump into some use cases.
There was a question that I received. So you talked about hybrid tracking with auto track and precision track. What are some situations in which precision tracking would be preferred?
Yeah, thanks, Katja. That's a great question. So like Ray mentioned earlier, we're big believers in auto track, but we know that that is not always going to cover off exactly what your use case is. So I can think of two right now that come to mind that have been pretty recent. Let's say you have a subscription funnel that you're going through. I enter my email address and for some reason I fat finger it and it's a bad address. If you're just tracking a click on that submit button, you might throw a false positive. But what you're really looking for is, behind the scenes, when you get that submission, it says, okay, it's successful. We've got a submission. And that's one way we can actually, use precision tracking to only on successful submission, you can then trigger an event to label that action. Another one that's come up recently, I think, Ray, you mentioned A/B testing tools. So you're running an A/B test on something that you just released, maybe a different call to action, some different text, moving some stuff around. When you're using a tool like Optimizely, they'll expose like that experiment and variation data behind the scenes. Obviously, you're not going to see those the names of the test directly on your application, but it's behind the scenes. This would be one way where you can use precision tracking to, make sure that, yes, we know that Optimizely is running this variation of this experiment. So that's another way you can use precision tracking, and that's not something that auto track won't necessarily, capture right off the bat. So.
I see we have another question from Michael in the chat. Michael, do you want to just go off mute and ask it?
Yes, I'm just looking at the pricing plans, and it says that in the free version, there are destinations core versus paid version destinations core and more. What is core and what is core and more, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, so most of our destinations are available as part of our free plan. Straight up, pretty much. What you get when you pay for a premium plan is you get the ability to integrate with warehouses. You also get access to the toolkit that I described earlier that allows you to create more customized destinations. It's the custom destination building toolkit we call functions. That is the majority of what the difference is there. Especially most of our customers will be looking to get a warehouse. That's usually the main thing that drives them towards the paid plan, because they have kind of greater needs for the data that Freshpaint is tracking beyond just the immediate need of getting a subset of data to just a small collection of tools like a product analytics tool and an email marketing tool.
Thank you very much, James. And another question, which you don't have to answer, but I'm just curious. What's the thinking behind the pricing? Because usually, like you would have say 3 tiers, free, some sort of like a self-serve, lower price for a smaller startup, and then maybe a custom plan for larger business, which, you know, price TBD kind of thing. What's the thinking of not having that sort of like PLG type self-serve for small startup at a low monthly cost?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty simple. It's just that we're interested in helping startups grow, and we're not interested in getting in their way when they're still figuring it out. We want to work with you as much as possible in the early stages to support you, so that when you do grow to a point where your needs mature and you're not just talking about 1 or 2 destinations, but now you want to add 4, 5, 6, and you need some help from us in terms of orchestrating that whole thing. That's where we really want to get involved. And so it's really just about kind of optimizing for the growth stage of the startup and not putting any hurdles in front of you early on when you're still figuring it out. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. So what you're saying is that basically you think that the free plan is sufficient for any startup unless you are like already in some sort of more mature phase, and at that point you'll intervene, so to speak, or not intervene, but step in to help out, like make it something more complex.
Yeah, I think you said it beautifully.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think that was a really great question from Gaurav as well. If you don't mind, let's talk about that to the whole group.
Yeah, so I just typed a response, but it is a great call out. So one of the things that I work with for new customers on, especially during the onboarding and implementation phase, is making sure that everyone understands who's going to be involved in the implementation process, because you're right, you've seen how easy it is to actually create events in Freshpaint. You could get in a situation where you have like free reign and you end up having the wild west of events ending up in your account, which you don't want. So before everyone just like dives right in because they're so excited about it, I want to make sure that people understand like what is the North Star metric that you're actually like trying to build towards, and make sure that everything you configure in the application drive towards that. I mean, there's always going to be some things here and there where you just need some quick learnings, and that's fine. Like you have that flexibility, but working with the teams that are going to be super involved in onboarding and implementation, everyone has that input right off the bat. Come up with a good foundational tracking plan to make sure that you don't have a lot of overlapping events, even duplicated events. So that's worked pretty well. It's just a matter of practicing a little bit of patience and definitely making sure that everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
Yeah, there's a second part about your question, Gaurav, and worrying about like negative impact on your app performance. So that's obviously a concern with with any kind of tracking, but our you'll see that our network calls, when we actually track an event, payloads are very, very small. They're all asynchronous. And, at the end of the day, you're still in control of anything and everything that you track. We have not had, as far as I've been here, we haven't had anyone, mention that, hey, like Freshpaint, you guys are slowing down our application. So it's something that our engineering team is definitely watching. But again, it's all about making sure that everyone is in a good understanding of what you want to track. Keep your configuration as tight as possible to make sure that you're not doing anything that I guess basically you don't need to do. And even if we have some customers with thousands of events because they have a lot of applications to track and a lot of things that they want to look at. But all of those events don't have to fire all at once. And it's really easy for them to just coordinate it off to the specific thing they're tracking, and it keeps things pretty performant.
Yeah, I was going to add to what Gil said. Just because we're focused on eliminating this lengthy process and helping you like instrument a lot of your site automatically, it doesn't mean that we don't believe in tracking plans and we don't believe in data governance. So like that's always a foundation, like understanding like what is the funnel that you're trying to measure, and then what are the steps along that funnel. It's always a good idea to have a tracking plan and to talk as a team. The value we provide is like, now when you're ready to implement that tracking plan, you can do it right now and send it to your analytics tool immediately. The other thing to call out is that we have a couple layers of data governance built into Freshpaint. So we auto track everything that's happening on your site, but remember, we're not doing anything with it. It's just sitting quietly in the background until you actually configure an event. We don't even pay it, like it's not even part of your event library. So that's the first step. You actually have to go in and say, this button click is something that's important for my like funnel and my analysis. The second layer of data governance, as you saw from the demo, we don't send that event anywhere. It's not like we auto track everything and just start sending it to all the tools in your tech stack. After you've configured the event, you have to actually specifically call out, where do you want to send it? Like some events you're only going to want to send for analysis to MixPanel. Other events you may want to send to engagement tools. Some events you may want to send to like multiple places, but you have control of both pieces. We're just doing the job quietly in the background until you tell us that things are important and where to send them. Gaurav, I just wanted to make sure that did that answer the question that you had? Great. Looks like there was one more question. Is there a maker checker? Someone create an event and some other person has to approve it. James, you want to talk a little bit about the product roadmap?
Yeah, well, so there's a few ways we handle this, Gaurav. When you set up a Freshpaint account, we're immediately going to give you a production environment and a demo environment. And the purpose for that, and actually, let me say, any event that you set up will be shared across those two. But we give you these two different environments so that you can essentially run environments or you can run events in a test environment that you have on your app before you push them to production. And what that allows you to do is essentially make sure that everything is working as expected there. And only when you're confident with how it's being tracked and what it's capturing, do you actually turn it on for your main production environment. So that's the current way that we recommend you go about this. We are also in the process of building out multiple roles in Freshpaint so that you can, as an admin, limit the visibility that other users would have. Some of the use cases that we've seen for that are maybe you want some users to only be able to view existing events, but not necessarily create new ones. Or, kind of more of an architect role where you should be able to add new destinations, but you don't need to access the customer data itself. So in the near future, we'll be kind of baking that out further to allow for multiple roles.
So I think we're going to wrap up here with a little rapid fire, like a few use cases just to kind of illustrate, like pull all this together. And thanks for all the great questions. I think we kind of tapped into some of those use cases in this conversation. So let me reshare my screen with you. So, if you can imagine, like, how would you benefit from what we just shared with you? Well, the first part, and I'm telling this through the lens of our customers. The first part is like product launches. People tell us all the time that before Freshpaint, they're not necessarily ready to track all the events with their product launch, or they had a tracking plan and as James and Gil pointed out, they missed a few things. So measuring the success of product launches is always something that people are feeling like they're not doing enough of. The benefit of Freshpaint is that because we can backfill historical data at any time, and because we allow you to self-serve with the visual editor, you can configure those funnel actions in minutes and then backfill and send a MixPanel to like get a funnel analysis right away. Or maybe it's an insights report. Maybe you're some kind of like meditation app and you want to understand like number of meditations per user because that's a critical event. You can quickly configure those actions and events, and again, backfill and send that historical data to MixPanel and to build an insight report. So this is like a security blanket for you to make sure that you're always going to have the data set you need to measure and iterate on like product launch. Oops. The next one is your analysis of your, like, let's say you have an activation thesis. How do you compress your ability to like measure that? Like a thesis is a thesis. We should always be open to like finding out something that we didn't expect. And so if you've come up with a tracking plan and you've instrumented things in such a way, because your thesis was, I think people that do these 3 actions are going to become an activated user, and you find out that's wrong, you have to go back and like get some new data to like come up with like a new way to measure things. So you're going to form a new thesis, and that's going to involve a bunch of new events that you didn't have before. Again, because you can do that in real time with our self-serve visual editor, and because you can backfill that data, you'll be able to create that analysis and iterate on it in real time and get a better answer more quickly. And then the last one I wanted to cover is, a lot of what we talked about is the product side. Like, there's a lot of work you can do in the product to improve the product, but we also know to drive activations and engagement, we also have the lever of messaging, whether that's in-app messaging, whether that's text messaging, whether that's email. And that same data set that you're iterating and collecting, that you're sending to your analytics tool, you can use those same customer data points to drive activations through personalized messaging. So one of our partners is Iterable. A lot of our customers eventually use an engagement platform like Iterable. And it's the same thing. You'll be able to improve the onboarding or personalization of your messaging to drive behavior by capturing those events and iterating on them and immediately sending them to Iterable and launching campaigns in the same day. And then, what does that look like in the real world? Like, what I want to make clear is that a lot of the work that you do, it's bit by bit, you're improving the experience, but the ultimate outcome can be step change. So one of our customers, that's a prop tech company called Ylopo, they use a combination of Freshpaint to get a better understanding of what did their customer really care about, and then how do we actually improve that? And so then through a whole bunch of A/B testing, they were able to drive 6x increase in lead volume. Their ultimate product to their real estate agent customers are leads and quality leads. Like, those agents just want to talk to people who ultimately are going to buy a house. They don't want to just waste a bunch of time. They were able to use analysis and A/B testing using Freshpaint and MixPanel to not only increase the lead volume by 6x, which is clearly a step change, but increase the quality simultaneously by 20%. So this is only because of their ability to iterate very quickly and test different theses and prove or disprove them very quickly until they land on something that's actually successful. And so then, just as a wrap up, like what we talked about today, Freshpaint helps you automatically track customer actions, helps you self-serve the event configuration, and then helps you backfill historical data. And what all that comes back to is that original problem side, which is you have a long wait time traditionally to be able to collect this data to do the work that you need to do. And with the Freshpaint model, we're able to get that information to you same day so you can act on it right away versus waiting a month or more due to the engineering process and life cycle. So yeah, I know we're right up against time right now, so I wanted to make sure we answered any remaining questions. But before I do that, I wanted to give an invite for everyone who's still on the call. We can't talk a lot about it, but we're going to take auto track and codeless event tracking to the next level very soon. We're going to be doing some things that make it even easier for you to implement event tracking without any engineering support. And there's an invitation here, and I think Dave was going to drop a link to it in the chat. But if your phone is out too, you can use the QR code. We'd love to invite you to an exclusive beta where we'll give you a first look at what that product looks like and get your feedback, and give you a chance to try something new before anyone else in the market. We're not offering this to anyone else, but for the folks on the product school call today. Any final questions before we let everyone go back to their day?
I received one question. How is Freshpaint different from other customer data tools like Segment?
That's really simple. All the traditional customer data tools that have been built up until today are built for engineers. You have to implement those events into the code base, and they do make it easier for you to route the data to destinations. The problem that we heard over and over and over again is that process of coding those events into the code base is too slow. And that's exactly how Segment works, where Freshpaint automates that process. So instead of it taking that month-long cycle, AutoTrack lets you get that customer data today immediately. So we think this is the first customer data tool built for business users like marketing leaders like me, product leaders who are on this call, data leaders who don't Like I'm technical, I'm sure most people are on this call. Like I don't live in the code base and nobody on this team would trust me to live in the code base. So until Freshpaint, I had no ability to self-serve my own customer data and move quickly.
All right. Well, if there are no more questions, I think this is us done. I'm going to stop the recording.